Does it start? Hey there, welcome back to the Leading Liberty podcast. I'm your host, Jen Gray, and I'm so excited you decided to tune in with us tonight, not only because this is the first live taping of Leading Liberty, but also because we've got a phenomenal guest for you tonight who knows all about how to get libertarians elected, and this is someone who is personally responsible for a lot of my professional happiness at this particular stage in my life, but has also had a huge impact on a lot of others running for office. I actually just met with a candidate yesterday who said he probably would never have run for office again if it weren't for this particular individual. And I'm talking, of course, about C. Michael Pickens, who has coached numerous candidates to record-breaking vote totals and local wins. He's been volunteering on Libertarian campaigns every year since 2011. He's the author of the book Libertarian Leadership and the creator of the Libertarian Leadership Academy. He's the former vice chairman of the Libertarian Party of California and of Spokane County, and the former chairman of the Libertarian Party of Washington, and is currently working to build the Libertarian Party of Bellingham with a plan to win every seat on the city council, which is pretty amazing. His main focus is to train and inspire libertarian candidates and activists to reach their full potential and win elections at all levels of government. He puts on live seminars for libertarian groups around the country, coaches local groups and campaigns and candidates, and has created that online Libertarian Leadership Academy that we're definitely going to talk more about because it's an amazing program. So on that note, without further ado, hey Michael, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Jen, thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I really appreciate everything you're doing with all the digital marketing and all the help that you're showing to the candidates and the training that you're doing as well. The only way for us to win is to continue to train and recruit and train and educate as much as possible. So thank you.
Totally, thank you. So I would love to know, what's your freedom fighter origin story? You know, what experiences in your life led you to this point of identifying as a libertarian?
Well, you know, it started a long time ago. Politically, it was through the Ron Paul campaign, 2007, 2008, but I've had a lot of personal experiences, and I know many others with personal experiences as well that led them to libertarianism. I think for me, though, in 2015, my dad called the cops on me for smoking pot, and I was put into the criminal justice system. And I learned firsthand that even though you don't hurt anyone else, you're still being punished by the government because you're doing something that they don't approve of. And that really got me thinking and has helped develop the train of thought that led to the Ron Paul campaign, learning about the actual political philosophy of libertarianism and learning that, hey, there's other people who believe what I believe, and then getting into that and then joining the Libertarian Party in 2011 and just continuing that progression and seeing it as well in my business life and in my friends and acquaintances' lives as well, on how more liberty, economic and social, provides for more happiness for more people. So
love it. And I think Ron Paul kind of got so what would you say is your most memorable libertarian moment where you felt like something you did really made a difference?
I think the tipping point for me was Don Meyer's city council campaign. I was coaching him, you know, on the phone every other day. You know, he says in his video that I called him every day, but I really didn't. It was like every other day, just to make sure that he was out shaking hands and that he had his schedule straight, and, you know, he's going to community events and just staying active in the community. You know, in his primary, he got second place. In the general, he barely beat out the incumbent, but he won. And he worked very hard for that. And then, since he's been city council member, he's been able to legalize chickens in Moses Lake. He's been able to remove the moratorium of cannabis downtown. He's been able to, you know, legalize off-road vehicles on the streets, things that are non-violent crimes or were non-violent crimes, right? And that's what I think most libertarians need to focus on, is how we can remove non-violent or consensual, or victimless crimes from, you know, policy. That's where we can focus on. There's way too many people. Let's just say we should focus more at the local level and focus on removing some of these victimless crimes that are out there.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about that. I mean, in the last election cycle, I was involved in 2 races, one of which was Gary Johnson, and obviously that was really exciting to be a part of that. But the other was a local level, and I really didn't appreciate until this last election that the decisions that we make at the local level are the things that really affect us the most every day. Things about our water and victimless crime, and whether a dispensary can open down the street, and what we can do on our private property and in our schools, and all these sorts of things. These happen at the local level, and that's a level where we can actually win. And I've talked about this on the show before, that the city council race, we won, and on half the budget of our much more established opponent. So I think you're exactly right that's where we can win and get people behind us based on who we are and what we stand for on a totally authentic level. So I love that. And I think what's really cool about your work is the results. I mean, because you've coached a number of candidates at this point to local wins or record-breaking vote totals at other levels of government. So tell us about that, and don't be shy, because I think the kind of people listening to this need to hear how possible it really is.
So instead of talking about some of the successes that we've had, I would actually like to go through the step-by-step process of doing it, right? So this is what I coach candidates. This is what I coach their campaign managers or their advocates, right? So it starts out with understanding why we're all taking action. So first you have to understand the why, which my why is my family, my son, my friends, caring about their future. Right, I'm sure that's probably a lot of what you're doing relates to it, correct? So all of us have our personal why and our personal motivation. So once we understand that, Nietzsche said it best: "He who has a why can endure any how." Right. So the how is what we have to figure out. Like, how are we going to provide more happiness for our friends and family? And it's through more libertarian policy, the ability for people to be able to provide for themselves, to start businesses, right? The diversification of industries, redistribution of wealth, the correct redistribution of wealth, which is through individual empowerment and local businesses versus big businesses. These are the things that libertarians should be focused on, should be educating themselves and sharing with the public, right? And then making that policy. And if we focus on the local level within our communities with the people that we can talk to, I was on the board of a chamber of commerce, president of a BNI chapter, member of Toastmasters, doing as much as I can in the local community to educate people so we can diversify the economy, right? And a lot of people don't realize is that once we get a majority of libertarians elected on city councils, the city council can change their constitution, or at least put forward an initiative to change their constitution that says that their laws supersede the state laws or the county laws or the federal government laws. So it could be more localized. So there's a lot of hardship going on in our local communities right now. And if you look at the reason why, it's a lack of funds. So the states, the federal government, especially the federal government, and the county governments pull a lot of money out of local communities through taxation, instead of letting the people at the local level keep their own money to spend in the communities. It's through government that they do this, through taxation, and then also through the consumer's own responsibility, which a lot of people don't understand, is when you spend money at big box stores or stores that are owned or businesses that are owned by people that live outside of their local area, that the money's going to leave. Most of it's going to leave. So it's just an education process through all of this. Like, hey, the federal government's taking all your money. You should, vote for a libertarian congressperson who's not going to increase the money being stolen from you, right? Just getting people to understand that these simple concepts that have been created or been, put out there as more confusing concepts, right? The media, the government doesn't put it out there in simple terms. So we need to go out in simple terms and let people know.
So I would love to dig into this how a little bit more, because I feel like that's where you have a really uniquely awesome area of expertise. So what were some of the key elements of the strategy behind these local wins and record-breaking races that you've done that you feel like made them so uniquely successful?
Definitely. So there's a book by Dale Carnegie called How to Win Friends and Influence People. So I recommend that libertarian candidates read that 10 plus times.
I second that recommendation.
And start applying all the rules that he has in there about winning friends and influencing people. Because when you find out, when you come with a very friendly approach on a lot of issues, even if they don't agree with our solution, they still like you and they'll still vote for you, right? Don't use the Arvin Vora method of persuasion. The Vora method does not work. Trust me. Yes. So think about this. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still, right? He may be right. He may be right that putting tax money, stealing tax money from people and putting it into the military, which it causes death and destruction overseas, is bad, right? He may be right there. But calling veterans moralist murderers will not win people over to our side to get that.
Right.
The only way,
especially veterans. I mean, if you think back to Gary Johnson and Ron Paul, that was the majority choice of veterans in the military who were very outspoken in to the extent that they could be about supporting them. So I feel like people have to have. They're some of our most credible advocates of all, for the same reason that Edward Snowden was such a great whistleblower. Like he had to have worked at the NSA first in order to have the impact that he had. Just the same way that our military members who are now with us, they have to have been in the military in order to now stand up and say, hey, this actually isn't ideal, and it's causing more problems than it's solving. Because you and I can say that all day long.
Yeah, look at Larry Sharpe. Larry Sharpe is a great example. Former Marine, he's going out there being a great representative of liberty, not pissing people off. He's recruiting a ton of people in the short time when he's been around. How is he doing it? He's being very respectful, very nice, right? It's really easy to see how he's doing it if we want to take a look at it, break down what he's doing.
Let's do that. Let's break down what he's doing. Why are people so drawn to Larry Sharpe? Because I know I definitely was. And when I first stumbled across him last year, I thought, wow, this is something totally different and I like it. So break it down. So why is Larry Sharpe so popular?
Larry's got the 80-20 rule, right? This is his rule. I'm more 70-30, but he's 80-20. Says if you agree with me on 80% of the issues, we should be able to ignore the other 20% we don't agree on. And what we'll find is that most libertarians are there. But also at the same time, he likes to move people towards that 80%, whatever percent they're at. And he's willing to accept people from where they are right now in their lives. The same thing with me. Before 2007, I thought we needed to be overseas drone striking people. I thought we needed to be over there attacking them. Otherwise, they'd be over here attacking us. I didn't understand yet that it's because we were over there that they hated us so much, right? They didn't hate us because of our freedom. They hated, they didn't hate us because of that. They hated us because we've been over there meddling in their business. So once we understand that, however, we have to understand that there's people who watch Fox News or CNN or whatever, and they've been programmed or brainwashed or whatever you want to call it to believe what they believe. All Muslims are bad. I grew up in
one of those families, and it took me 25 years to figure out that's not really the way the world works. So if somebody had approached me at age, I guess maybe I was 22, I should give myself a little bit of credit. But if somebody had approached me at age 20 and said, hey, you're an idiot, how can you possibly think that?
Yeah, I know.
Really turned me on.
Exactly. I would have said, hey, screw you, peace out, right?
Yeah.
But if they would have said, you know what, I used to think like you think right now, and then I got this new information, here's all this new information, and then I started thinking this way because I found this new information.
Yeah, exactly right.
It's not that difficult. It's really not that difficult.
So hypothetically speaking, I have decided to run for office, and this is a pure hypothetical. People ask me this all the time, and the answer is not yet.
Sure.
But hypothetically speaking, I'm running for office. What do I do now? What's the most important thing for people to do first?
So
after the why.
Well, yeah, after the why. What I recommend, the most important thing to do is to get a membership to the Libertarian Leadership Academy, whether it's a free membership or paid, it doesn't matter. Everyone gets access to the same thing. But you have my foundational leadership course and you have Larry Sharp's How to Build a Campaign Team course. Now get this. You have the How to Build a Campaign Team course, right? And then my foundational leadership course. I teach how to get people interested. Once they're interested, when you get their why to bring them on your campaign, you say, now that we agree, how would you like to help? And they'll say, however you need me. Great. Watch this course, and there's all these different campaign positions that you can learn about. Whatever you want to do, let me know. Now, they can self-identify with the 7 different volunteer positions on a main campaign, and then they can actually start forming teams around other people who also want to be in those positions. Because the issue that I found with myself and other people is that we only have so much time to volunteer because we work, we have businesses, right? So I like to play, a small part in campaigns. The same thing with people on any campaign. There could be a press team. Each one of their jobs can be separate and very small. So you have the press team coordinator who's then sending out contact information for all the newspaper or the media articles to the other press team members so they can make a couple phone calls, not a whole lot. They don't have to make a lot of phone calls, just a couple to start introducing the candidate. Like, we can break down these big campaign tasks into really small campaign tasks and work as teams. So it's the same thing that I teach.
So
with
take us to those other volunteer roles, because we've got the press team. So for people who are either running and thinking, okay, who do I need around me? Or for people who are thinking, okay, how can I help get a Libertarian elected? What are those other 6 core people?
Okay, so that would take a lot of time to go through all 6 core people, but what the campaign really needs is a strong ground game. So that is the precinct map with 68 different precincts for the city of Bellingham, right? We've got 18 precincts committee officers identified right now, but that's what we need most. People who are willing to go around in their local communities, in their local neighborhoods, and just hang up marketing material, whether there's a campaign or not. It could be we're putting together a new marketing piece where we're talking about transparency in government, because city government here in Bellingham makes it to where any city documents are property of the city instead of property of the taxpayer, property of the citizen, which they should be. So we're going to be fighting for transparency, right? And pushing that issue out, which will be able to recruit a lot more people focusing on an issue versus focusing on the Libertarian Party. And this is just another new strategy that we're trying. And what Libertarians from around the country need to understand is that any idea that they have, they need to make it a reality. When I was state chair, I've got emails that said, if Libertarians just did this, you'd get elected. If Libertarians just focused on this, you'd get elected. And what we found is that, yeah, they're right in that area. So if they just went forward with their ideas, if all of us just went forward with our ideas, just like you did with the digital marketing piece, if everyone just did that, we would be winning a lot more elections.
Totally. So I want to talk a little bit more about the Libertarian Leadership Academy, because you've documented a lot of your experience there and turned it into this amazing resource. So who's it for, and what kinds of things can people expect to learn in there beyond the foundational leadership when it comes to actually how to deal with the process of getting elected?
Okay, so there's the overall strategy, right, of running for office as a Libertarian and recruiting people and all that good stuff. But there's other intricate stuff like fundraising. How do you fundraise? Fundraising for events, fundraising one-on-one, in person, putting a campaign prospectus together. There's that. There's going door to door. How to train other people. right? There's so much more in the academy. There's a lot of personal development stuff too. How to expand your comfort zone, right? How to overcome your fears. This may sound, up in the air, but this is stuff that we need to get over. I've known this in public speaking and doing these interviews, being able to do an interview like this and not feel nervous beforehand, or doing a full day seminar and not feel nervous. Like, these are things that we all have to learn to be able to overcome, and to understand that we need to learn them. Otherwise we're fucked.
I totally agree with you, and I'm really glad you brought this up, because there aren't a whole lot of people who are talking about personal development in the libertarian space, and it's so important, because our mindset is the lens through which we are seeing everything else in our human experience, right? And it's taken me, I mean, when you said talking about doing an interview like this and not being nervous about it, 2 years ago, I would never have done this. But now I love it, because it's contributing to a mission that's important to me. So what if, for people who are kind of just getting started with personal development, what would you say are some of your top resource or book recommendations, things that really influenced you?
Okay, so let me just say this though. You have to always ask yourself a question before you do anything. Will I be better off? Will I be worse off? Or will my position remain the same if I take this action and not succeed? So for example, will you be better off, worse off, or remain the same running for city council and not succeeding, which means you lose, right? So you think about, the answer is you'll be better off, because you'll start to gain new experience, build that foundation, start to recruit new volunteers, new donors. Your website's going to be up. You're going to start to refine your issues. So the next time you run, 2 years from now or whatever, you'll be way ahead of the game. And we have to understand that we need to have a long-term vision with short-term goals. We're in a much bigger war with smaller battles along the way. And luckily for us, that every battle we go into, we will just learn from. We don't actually die. We just learn from it. They're all experiences, right?
Right.
So that's one thing we need to understand, that we need to treat our lives right now as a video game character. So when you're going through a video game and you defeat opponents, every opponent you defeat, your character gains experience points. And as it gains a certain level of experience points, the character levels up. And it's the same thing in life. As long as we apply that, the more times that I speak in public, the better I get. This last seminar that I gave in Orlando, I killed it. It was 5 hours of awesomeness, right? Versus 2 years ago, where I was reading off my slides, word for word, and people in the audience were like, "Oh, you're doing a good job. Keep going," right? Versus, "Hey, this is awesome. You're kicking ass." And we have to understand that we're going to release crap 1.0 before we get to good 2.0, before great 3.0, before amazing 4.0. And it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. And there's been, too much in the Libertarian Party and the Liberty Movement, in life in general, of people looking at mistakes as something negative. And we need to look at it as something positive. If Arvin Vora came out tomorrow and said, "You know what? I've been doing this all wrong, and this is how I should have been doing it," and starting to be inclusive and starting to be positive, right? I would say, "Awesome. Thank you for learning. Let's rock and roll," right? Because I've known a lot of people who flipped from that. I flipped from that. I used to be really negative. And now I've flipped around, like, this isn't working. So we need to fix this. How are we going to get a whole lot more people on our team so we're not getting screwed? It's really defense mechanism. So,
and I think it takes a certain level of humility to be able to kind of look at the post-game reel and see, okay, what worked really well there? What didn't work there? What could I have done differently last time? And really kind of examine the performance there and decide how we want to move forward. So I think that's a great perspective. And you've mentioned something else that you've touched on, and I want to kind of circle back to it, talking about fundraising and donors and stuff like that, because I have been raising money for a long time, and it's not easy to get people to max out for anyone, much less a libertarian. So what would you say is the most you hear when you're fundraising for libertarians, and what's the best way to overcome that?
So what libertarians need to do, what we all need to do when we're trying to fundraise, is create a prospectus. So if you Google how to create a prospectus or how to write a prospectus, most prospectuses have to do with business, right? Investing in a business. So we have to look at all of our campaigns or initiatives as the same thing. People will invest in a business because of the returns for that business. So you start with your prospectus with the why. You write out the why you're doing it. Then you write out the benefits of what happens because of that, right? So because you're running for office, you're going to raise awareness on this issue, this issue, this issue, that issue, whatever. Whatever you think that your donors that you support that are libertarians or the average people, what you can get them over on, you write that in your prospectus. And then, right, so you got your why, and then you got your how, the benefits that are involved with the why. And then after that, you have your ask. You know, I'm going to make sure that all of these items get put out there in the public, but I need your help buying rack cards and signs and paying for the website and paying for advertisement or whatever else you think you need for your campaign. And then you put that in your prospectus and how much money you need with a specific ask. And then you ask people for it. Because if they know that you have a plan, they'll donate to you. If you feel confident, they'll donate to you. But guess what? If you write that out, you're going to be even more confident when you go into a donor meeting. So that's one thing that I notice that libertarians are working on getting better at. Libertarian candidates are working on getting better at writing their plan out and showing people that they're serious. Donors, there's three types of activists within the Libertarian Party. You have people who have a lot of time and no money. You have people who have a lot of money and no time. And then you have the middle, the gray area, right? The wide gray area. Okay. So writing that plan will actually help you recruit more volunteers and more big donors, because even the volunteers will see that you have a plan. And when you show up with clipboards and precinct maps and rack cards and posters, have all the materials necessary, they're going to be more apt to volunteer. And it's the same with the donors. If you show up with your binder, with your whole prospectus in there, and you point everything out, they're going to be more apt to donate because they understand that you're serious about it. People want to invest in a sure deal, right? Same with business owners. They want you to know before they invest in your business that you have everything outlined, that you know everything's going to happen, right? Yeah. It's the same thing. Is that something
that you go in depth on in the Libertarian Leadership Academy?
Yeah, I have a sample prospectus that's downloadable in the Academy. I talk about the different sections of it.
So I will link up the Libertarian Leadership Academy in the show notes so everybody can check that out. And I'd like to ask another question about the foundational libertarian leadership. So if you had to kind of distill that down to a couple key pillars of a great libertarian leader, what would they be?
Okay, so I'll go through the different lessons. There's 12 different lessons in that course. The first one is your why. You have to really understand why you're doing it. That's going to push you through all the hardship, all the no's, all the rejection, but it's also going to push you towards all the other successes that you're going to get. The second part is to understand what the philosophy of liberty actually is. You know, understanding that more liberty in our economic lives equals more prosperity, more liberty in our social lives equals more happiness, right? In everyone in society. That's the second part. The third part is more of an in-depth philosophical analysis of libertarianism. We go through self-ownership. We go through the non-aggression principle. And then we go to level 4, or the lesson 4, and that's to stretch your comfort zone and to start breaking through barriers. We talk about how you learn new skills, right? There's level 6 is, or lesson 6, excuse me, is organizational development, team building, recruiting. You know, there's a lot of salesmanship stuff that's involved with this. We need to understand that the average person won't accept a new idea until they've experienced it at least 7 times.
Right.
So we have to understand that you're just looking to plant a seed in the first conversation. You're not looking to grow an entire tree. And a lot of libertarians are very intellectual, and that's good. That's a good thing. But we have to understand we're dealing with people that are not so much. So go out there to plant a seed, not to grow an entire tree in one conversation. Take it step by step. It's a sales process. And there's
definitely
more. I could go even more in depth on some more advanced strategies too.
Give us one. What's your favorite advanced strategy?
Okay, so my favorite advanced strategy, I just added it to my seminar this last weekend. So in Orlando was the first time I gave that, but it was the analysis of the game of chess versus the Chinese game of Go. Most people look at politics like the game of chess, right? So you've got 16 pieces on each side, and your goal is to capture the other side's pieces. It seems this is what the Republicans and Democrats are doing a lot of. They're fighting against each other. Or with Libertarians, a good example of this is with the Republican Liberty Caucus. So you got the RLC people and the Libertarian people going to their events, trying to pull each other over, right? The best vehicle is the Republican Party. The best vehicle is the Libertarian Party, right? Those guys are the ones playing chess. I'm the guy playing Go. Go, you start out with a blank board. You have stones. And what you have to do is add a stone, and your opponent adds a stone, and they add a stone, you add a stone. And the goal is to surround your opponent by adding pieces to a blank board. So it's the same thing in politics. If you're facing outward, adding stones to the board, which means you're getting more voters, you're going to be able to beat your opponent because you're shaking more hands and you're adding more stones to the board. Whereas your opponent, they may be shaking the hands of the people who already support them, right? Or trying to convince their opponent's people to support them, which is not bringing in new people. We need to be focusing on independence. When we talk about the reality of our situation, right? You met with a candidate yesterday in Arizona. There's 74% independents there. That is a huge number of independents. Those are the people who aren't committed to Republicans or committed to Democrats. Focus on the low-hanging fruit, right? Figure out the best way to recruit them, go out and shake their hands, and add them to the board and start surrounding our opponents. So
definitely. I'm really glad you brought that up with independents, because I feel like they can sometimes be a tough group to crack because they're not on the Republican list and the Democrat list. Where are the best places, either online or in person, for Libertarian candidates to get out there and really shake hands, either literally or digitally, with independents?
So I think the best places are churches or community events, Chamber of Commerce meetings, anywhere that there's going to be other people, fairs, street fairs, farmers markets, anywhere where there's going to be other people who may be interested in what we have to sell. So our target market are those who kind of think like we do, right? It's not everyone, it's those who kind of think like we do. If we look at the numbers, if we get a simple majority in an election, we can win the election. And if we look at voter turnout and the amount of people registered to vote, it's only about 10% of the population. If we can get 1 out of 10 people to agree with us and vote for us, we win elections.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And I'm glad you
broken the numbers down. Go ahead.
Oh, so I'm glad you gave me those examples of physical places to go out and do stuff like this, because I tend to kind of live in my little digital behind the screen hidey hole. And but I tell people all the time that anything you do online, it's great, but it's not it's a supplement, not a substitute.
Yes.
For that personal contact. That's really important. But to the extent that you can't physically shake everyone's hand, this is a great way for people to at least get out in front of you. So I'll add to that mix on the online side. You can target people who watch Trevor Noah and John Oliver. Seriously, I mean, that's what independents are, who are politically inclined. That's what they're doing. You can target independent voters, excluding Republicans, excluding Democrats. So there's a lot of cool stuff that we can do. And independents are over half of the voter base. So,
oh yeah,
across. So if we could get a fraction of them, we'd be the champions. It makes it feel a lot easier than it probably actually is, but.
Definitely. So independent voters, you have to look at them as people being uncommitted, right? Republicans, people who call themselves Republicans or Democrats, are committed to their organization, right? Let's look at the definition of commitment. The definition of commitment is the elimination of any other alternative, right? When people get married, they commit to the other person, right? There's no other alternative. I'll love you for the rest of my life. Now, look at the political party. When they're committed to the Democrats or the Republicans and they call themselves that, that's going to be a much tougher nut to crack than someone who says, I'm not committed to any political party, which are the independents. Right. So that's who we should be focusing on. And we have to, you know what I mean? That's a great analogy for that, though.
I do, and I think you're exactly right. And just with Mark Wick's campaign, for example, we really saw that where we tested a bunch of different messages, and anytime we said something that expressed frustration with Republicans or Democrats, and we called that, those videos didn't perform as well. And I realized in hindsight that it's because we're using a label that these people have taken on. So even if they're not happy with it, they probably feel criticized by us expressing frustration with this. And we think that's their frustration, but it's not. So let's turn that off and see which message is resonating. And it was basically an almost identical way of saying a slightly different way of saying the exact same thing, which was, we're tired of the two-party bickering that passes for public service these days. Same message, slightly different wording without the labels, and it totally resonated. So exactly. I think that's a great way to hit the independents, is to just not call by name.
Yeah. So we don't want to piss people off, and we don't want to make them feel embarrassed because of who they were. I came from the Republican Party. I have a really good success rate as recruiting Republicans. Why? Because I can say, you know what? I've been there. I've been a Republican. Then I got this new information called self-ownership and the non-aggression principle, and I realized I was a Libertarian, and just moved them through the process, and everything's great. Versus, oh, you're a Republican? Screw you. You could go off on them. They're never going to move through the process. The only way we can win is if we get people who are voting against us or not voting to vote for us.
Totally.
It's the
totally
whole 3,000 tyrants thing. So there's a quote, it was in the movie The Patriot, and he asked a question, do you believe that we're trading one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away? Right? Do you think that that's actually what our founding fathers did?
That's an interesting question. Keep going.
So do you think that, though? Do you think we traded one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away?
Not immediately. I think eventually that's what happened. It didn't happen overnight.
Sure. And you're absolutely correct, right? In the beginning, we traded it for a continental Congress, right? And then eventually it spread down to the lower levels to where we are right now. And now we have our neighbors are the 3,000 tyrants. Those people who are voting for Republicans and voting for Democrats, voting for authoritarian policies to be implemented on all of us. Even them. They don't realize it sometimes, but even them. So we have to understand that the only way we're going to win is if we convince those 3,000 tyrants to stop being tyrants and to become libertarians, to stop being authoritarians, people who believe in outside authority, to start being libertarians, people who believe in individual liberty. So,
I love it.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. So, and you've touched on something else I wanted to bring up, because you've helped build one of the largest state parties in the country, and I know a lot of areas, my own included, where the state party is operating at probably a less than optimal level. So how important is that to get candidates elected, and how do we achieve that change?
So it has to do with culture. It really has to do with culture, what I found. If the culture of the Libertarian Party becomes that of personal growth, personal empowerment, not caring about title, about being the chair or whatever, and it just matters about helping people improve, then we'll win. I learned this a lot from Toastmasters. When you go into a Toastmasters meeting, the mission of everyone within that organization is to help you become a better public speaker. If the mission of everyone within the Libertarian Party is to help everyone become better at whatever it is they want, then we'll win elections. That's how we're going to improve and build the organization. So,
love it.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, on a somewhat unrelated to elections note, just because for people to get to know you at a more personal level, I saw that you did a live stream on this a while back. So I have to know, on smuggling weed, how to smuggle weed to the airport and what to do if you get caught.
Yes.
Help us out.
Okay, so 2 videos, how to smuggle weed through the airport, and then a follow-up on what to do if you get caught smuggling weed in the airport. So professionally, I own 3 companies that have nothing to do with the Libertarian Party. I do the Libertarian Party stuff for fun. One of my companies, I broker cannabis here in Washington State, and I believe cannabis should be legal across the country. So for the past couple of years, I've been smuggling cannabis wherever I fly, wherever I go. And I don't smuggle it. It's not hard to find. Sometimes I put it in my jacket, in my laptop bag, sometimes both places, in my carry-on or check-in. Like, I've brought a lot of weed around with me, and it's always for fun, right? But I think as long as I'm not hurting anyone, I should be able to do it. Now, in the follow-up video on what to do if you get caught, I talked about understanding that if you're going to take this action, there may be consequences associated with that. So you better be ready. Now, I've got people ready. If I get caught and I get thrown in jail at any airport in any city, there's going to be people who are flying in hours, like, to get me out. So I've set this up. We got to understand that anyone else out there thinking about doing this, you have to have the resources to protect yourself as well. Otherwise, it's not going to work very well. So
good to know.
Yes.
on like a personal and creative level, who would you say are some of the people, authors, musicians, speakers who've inspired you, either libertarian or otherwise?
So obviously it was Ron Paul in the beginning. Recently, it's been Larry Sharpe. I met him 2 years ago in Colorado. I was speaking at the convention. He was speaking at the state party convention there. He saw me speak. He was like, wow, I love what you're doing. I saw him speak. I was like, where have you been all my libertarian life? Right? So we've coordinated and talked, since then, for the past couple of years. And he's actually helped me negotiate contracts and figure out how I'm going to work contracts in my business life. And he's also been a great libertarian communicator and role model, and has helped me with my communications, maybe not being so pissed off or triggered or, unfriendly, whatever it is. We all move forward, and he's been a great influence on me. So he's someone that I definitely support. And I believe if there were 1,000 Larry Sharpes around the country right now, we would be winning major elections.
I totally agree. And you're exactly right. Yeah. He's so great at communicating libertarian ideas. I recently listened to the interview he did on the We the Blue podcast, where he's talking about all the ways that we actually agree with progressives, because libertarians just kind of demonize the left a lot. And I'm like, can we please not? Because there are a lot of things that we really agree on. And he does such a great job of that. So I will link that up in the show notes too. And I did an interview with him also where I said, hey, here's this communication challenge that I've been having for the past 30 years of my life that's basically made it impossible for me to communicate with my family to address this. And he solved the problem in like 2 seconds. So he's an incredible communicator, and if we would all learn from him, I think the Libertarian Party would be in a much better position. So last thing I wanted to ask you, I know that you sometimes do scholarships for people running for office to become a part of the Libertarian Leadership Academy. So what do people need to do that? It's just go to a link and fill out a form. So it's libertarianleadership.org/get-sponsored.html,
and it's on libertarianleadership.org. If they go to the training tab, they go down to online training, there'll be the Get Sponsored tab there. So we'll sponsor anyone out there watching this. If you can't pay $20 a month, it's cool. Don't worry about it. Just go through the training anyways. You get the same access as anyone else does, right? And we need to educate as many libertarians as possible. We need to get them out there and recruit new people and educate new people. Thomas Jefferson said it best. What do you say? Educate and inform the whole mass of the people. They're the only sure alliance for the preservation of our liberty. Which leads into Samuel Adams' quote, it does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. Well, how do you set brush fires of freedom in the minds of men? Well, you educate them on self-ownership, on non-aggression, right? This is how we solve a lot of things. If every child understood self-ownership and non-aggression, we'd have a much more peaceful world. So,
totally. Well,
yeah.
Thank you so much for everything you do, for coming on the show, for all the resources that you've created for libertarians out there planning on running for office or helping people who are. We just appreciate what you're doing so much and look forward to seeing more of your work in the future.
Yes, thank you so much, Jen. I've got my next book that'll be coming out soon, and I'm going to give it away for free, just like I did with the first one. So that's going to be our plan, more of a national plan on building the Libertarian Party. So it'll be really
Where
nice.
can people get on a list to get your book before it comes out?
Not yet, but I think we'll have this conversation soon.
All right, perfect. Well, we will keep people posted on the book. We're looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.